Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome and a happy new year to everyone from the entire core HRIR team. In association with HRCI, we are here with our 21st Learning Weekend webinar, and of course, the first one to begin with in year 2020. I am Jyoti Sharma, your host for the day, and we have Dr. Aneeta Madhok with us today, who will enlighten us on the topic emotionally intelligent communication for managers in the new age. Before we begin with our much awaited webinar, a little bit about the core HRIR group. We are a network of 1,000 plus HR professionals who have connected on a single platform with a vision to network, learn, share insights with each other, and for professional development for one and all. We have proudly undertaken multiple initiatives since our very inception that pave way in grooming leaders for tomorrow. Our first initiative was providing everyone an interactive WhatsApp platform to have numerous discussions and knowledge sharing on a day to day basis. The next step for us was the launch of Learning Weekend webinar series, and this is our 21st webinar today. The next initiative was the Chai Buddy series, wherein all HR professionals meet face to face, network, and gain insights from our industry leaders. Another daunting initiative for Core HRIR Group is our career opportunities, which is the Core HRIR Career Center platform. This helps HR professionals explore opportunities in India and overseas. It connects recruiters and the prospective candidates. All recruiters are welcome to share their JDs with us, and our AI system automatically matches the top 10 HR profiles and shares the resumes with you. Our next credit was the Shining HR Award series, which is to felicitate outstanding and deserving HR professionals. Our recent highlight is the Core Connect, wherein we invite views on trending topics and the best insights that are shared and published in the groups. Our recent initiative also includes the HRCI scholarship test and the 8th Mega HR Conclave, which was held in Noida on 30th of November. Moving on with our today's session, I feel extremely privileged to introduce our speaker for the day. She's Dr. Aneeta Madhok. She's the managing director with Open Spaces Consulting. We'll just move on to the next slide, which gives an overview of her profile. Open Spaces Consulting is a leading HR and OD consulting firm. She has over 35 years of overall experience, which includes more than 15 years of coaching expertise. Prior to setting up Open Spaces Consulting, Dr. Anita was Dean with School of Narsi Munji Institute of Management Studies and SP Jan Center of Management in Dubai and Singapore. She also had a long stint in HR with DCM Group and in FMCG Group. She's accredited in the usage of the Leadership Circle, MBTI, FIRO-B, which is the Fundamental Interpersonal Relations Orientation, Thomas Profiling, Belbin Team Roles, and is also SHRM Master Trainer and ACC accredited from International Coach Federation. She's also a fellow of Sumedha's Academy and a PhD in psychology. On the personal front, she is an avid traveler. She has been to 51 countries and has recently taken up running as a hobby. She'll be attending the Mumbai Marathon on 19th of January. With over three major innings in her life, she is a true example of a leader who has shifted gears, reinvented her career, and been on top of her core strengths. A little bit about me. I have 14 plus years of total experience in HR in various gamut of HR activities. I'm currently working with British High Commission and have previously worked with organizations like British Council, Aon Hewitt, and IBM. So, moving on to our much awaited topic of the day, which is emotionally intelligent communication for managers in the new age. So, without wasting much time, I would request Dr. Anita Madhok to take it on from here and share her insights with us. Over to you, Dr. Anita.
Thank you so much, Jyoti. It has been very nice for me to spend a nice Saturday morning enjoying myself on doing this webinar for you. on a subject that is very dear to me and subject that I feel there's been a lot of talk about, but nobody understands it very deeply. So emotional intelligence, everybody blames other people like that person is not emotionally intelligent and so should have been more, but nobody looks within themselves to see what emotional intelligence really means to them and how they give a more intelligent response. Very briefly, emotions are a very integral part of who we are. In fact, they define who we are. And whatever feelings we feel, whatever emotions, the word emotion comes from motive, something that moves us, something that drives us. So it defines who we are. Intelligence is defined as a logical, rational part of our brain which is able to reason out and is able to put logic and rationale to what we are experiencing. So when we put the two together, emotions are very often irrational, and intelligence is the rational aspect. So feeling our emotions, understanding them, being able to talk to our emotions, being able to sort ourselves out and understand our feelings and emotions, and then acting from that understanding is what emotional intelligence is about. And this entire webinar is going to focus on the future and how it is evolving. And I think part of it is already here. The future is already what we are experiencing today. A lot of changes in our lives, 2020, and how templates of human behavior have changed, templates of leadership have changed, templates of what is success has changed, templates of how we will exercise ourselves and how we will express ourselves and manage ourselves have changed enormously. We put in a lot of effort and energy in protesting against change. We put in a lot of effort and energy in resisting change and saying, hey, no, I wish things were the way they used to be. And we never think about the change is irreversible. And how do we embrace this change rather than resist it? And going with the flow and embracing the change and changing ourselves to adapt to the situation is the secret to success in the future and the new age. So that's what we are going to be focusing on for this webinar. Let me take you to our first slide, which is what is the new age and how do we win it with emotional intelligence? I'm sure many of you have heard about the fourth industrial revolution. A person called Klaus Schwab, who has started the World Economic Forum, who owns the World Economic Forum, has written this book a couple of years ago, and he talks about Industry 4.0. And 2 years ago, he said we are at the beginning of a revolution that is fundamentally changing the way we live, work, and relate to each other. And then he goes on to explore what these fourth industrial revolution is about. So the first industrial revolution you might have read in your history books is about mechanizing, water power, steam power. The locomotives were developed, machines were developed, mechanical clockworks were developed in the first industrial revolution. People stopped making things by hand and they made things by machines instead. In the second industrial revolutions, there was a focus on scaling up mass production, assembly lines, large-scale operations of manufacturing, batch process, continuous process. In the third industrial revolution, which many in my lifetime have visited and have witnessed, was when computers came in. I lived through times when there were no computers and there were no mobile phones. And we saw the computers coming in and we saw the automation the way it is today in organizations. So that was the third industrial revolution. Today we are on the cusp. I will not say we are at the beginning, I'll say we are at the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, which is about cyberspace. It's about networks, it's about artificial intelligence, it's about automation at a level which we've not seen before. And, uh, and that's fundamentally changing the human experience. Socially also, I believe we have changed hugely from being tribal cultures to agrarian cultures, And till our grandparents' generation in India, we lived in joint families, and then joint families moved out. Many you'll still see a lot of joint families, but many joint families moved out and became nuclear families. And nuclear families are now giving way to nuclear people, where each individual is more important than the collective space. So, in social sense and psychological sense, also there has been a lot of change. So. Let me take you to the next slide, which is talking about the new age being changing the way we impact ourselves physically. So, in physically, we will have autonomous vehicles. There's already experiments with driverless driving in many countries, and I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a huge revolution. 3D printing has already begun. They are printing out body parts. They're printing so many things by 3D printing. Advanced robotics at the physical level, you will see actual change. At the digital level, you will see Internet of Things, a lot of Internet. Everything works only on the Internet. Without that, nothing works. Blockchain, Bitcoin technologies, networking platforms. We moved from Facebook to Instagram and to TikTok. All kinds of networking platforms, social networking platforms. At the biological level, the way we manage our bodies and our biology, the genome is being now understood, and we are looking at genetically modifying, plants and crops, and to some extent also human beings, where their genetic defects we're able to understand and how to rectify those. The synthetic biology, so you've got body parts, knee joints replacement, heart valves, all being created synthetically and being replaced. And there is a lot of data. Just yesterday there was a Google release that Google has developed artificial intelligence software that is able to predict and analyze and understand cancers, especially breast cancers, much before any human doctor can. So the computers are now replacing, artificial intelligence replacing doctors in diagnosis as well. And it's already here. So the impact of this is being felt at different levels. We are now supercharged human beings, and it calls for more human leadership, more humane leadership, and more human leadership. And we need leaders who are emotionally intelligent, understand and tune into the feelings of people. It was all right in the past to command and control, but today no longer so. You have to take people along with you. You have to buy in, get their buy-in to everything that you do. They are able to champion cooperative working, so people need to work in a cooperative sense with each other. Today's leader will coach rather than command. And any one of you who understands coaching knows that coaches don't give advice, they don't give direction. They allow you to form your own direction, and they allow people to live life their own way. And yet you have to keep the flock together. Future leaders will be driven by empathy, not ego. So it's not that I'm the most intelligent person in the room, I'm the only one who has all the solutions, everything has to be my way, and I'm the one who will dominate the space. No, that is all ego driven. You have to have empathy, you have to understand every person where he is and bring him and meet them where they are at, and then bring them forward from there. So the digital revolution needs a different kind of, more human kind of leadership. About change. Like I said, things have changed, and there's an interesting cartoon there for you to read to keep you also engaged. It's your choice. You can resist change, you can embrace change. It's up to you which side of the fence you sit on. I want to spend a few minutes more on Gen Z and what it wants. So the new generation, many of you who are tuned in today already, I could see a lot of younger profiles, people in their late 20s, early 30s, and we call you the Gen Z, millennial generation. The attention span is becoming shorter and shorter, because as you are being brought up, you're subject to more and more data. You don't have time to deal with all this data. So people are, the psychology of people is changing, the brain's capacity to to process information is changing, and attention span is roughly now 8 seconds. And if in 8 seconds people don't make sense, it shifts. And we all experience this in our time. Young generation is all netizens. They are super fast on the internet. Many of us had to learn these skills late on in our lives, but the young generation is born with these skills. Monetary rewards are the goals. In our time, we used to talk about intrinsic reward, sense of satisfaction, sense of engagement, but the real goals today are monetary. People look at work as a way to earn money so that they can spend that money on doing stuff that they really enjoy and feel satisfied with. And that's a fact that's here to stay. That doesn't change. You can't reward people by intrinsic motivation and not pay them enough. You could in our times, but not anymore. The young generation, the Gen Z, is relationship challenged. They've spent so much time on their mobile phones. They've spent a lot of time on their computers. They are used to texting rather than communicating. They're used to sending emails or sending text messages rather than picking up the phone and speaking. And you can't change that. You can only flow with that change. You can't resist that change. It's going to become increasingly more and more difficult to have face-to-face conversations for the young generation. So that gives a challenge in terms of how do I manage relationships. So the young generation to me is relationship challenged as well because of the way in which they communicate. More text, more less face to face. Also, I believe the young generation is a very caring and very sensitive generation. The young generation is here to heal the world. A lot of youth today speak about social work, about environment consciousness, about how do we tackle pollution, how do we heal the world. So the next generation believes themselves to be social justice minded as well. There is something called the gig economy that is also increasing. That's a change you cannot reverse. The gig economy consists of individuals who would rather work on their own rather than work in a large organization. Some years ago, there was a book, I put an icon of the book out there, Free Agent Nation by Daniel Pink. And he spoke about the world moving towards each individual as a bundle of talents, operating in a space which his talents are available for hire, his talents are available for rent to organizations based upon a project that they may have, based upon an assignment. So a gig worker or a free agent is one who doesn't work within the system, is not an employee, is not bound by rules, regulations, but you give him a set of deliverables, he works on his own time, in his own space, and is able to deliver you those deliverables. So we are moving more and more towards a gig economy and transient working spaces. And I do believe the young generation will work for a few years, save up some money, then they'll go on a world trip, they'll go do whatever they have to do, chase their hobbies, and then they'll reinvent themselves, learn a new skill, and keep coming back, to earn some more money, and then go back to enjoy themselves also. That's how the gig economy is increasing, and gig workers are also increasing. So that means that 57% businesses benefit from hiring free agents and saving 20% of the costs. So it has a business case as well. Talent attrition is here to stay. You cannot wish that away. Future of work lies in short-term contracts, short temporary employments, freelance work, and not in permanent jobs anymore. Don't wish for a permanent job. It's a thing of the past. And young generations will have a lifetime of many careers instead of one career for a lifetime. That's here to stay. So there is some more information here on the gig economy worker. And my next slide speaks about a case for emotional intelligence. Do we really need to say it? We need to become more and more emotionally intelligent, more and more mature in our ways of working to survive in the future. So let's just see from the construct point of view, what is emotional intelligence? So there's a cartoon here that says, You're not being replaced by a robot. You're being replaced by someone else who understands robots. So, so you got to understand the nature of the change. I used to be doing stuff. Now I have to manage a robot that does that stuff that I used to be doing. So there's a shift over there. Daniel Goleman described emotional intelligence or defined emotional intelligence as the capacity to be aware of, to control and express one's emotions. So, awareness, control, and expression. To handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. So, there were five aspects to emotional intelligence. First is emotional self awareness. Who am I? What am I feeling? What's this emotion? How do I define it? How do I understand it? Then, second is how do I manage this emotion? How do I express it? How do I be authentic with myself in that expression? And not destructive or giving to rage and anger and express it in a destructive way. How do I keep myself motivated? What drives me? What are the right emotions to drive me? How do I understand other people and be empathetic to them and understand their emotions? And social skills. So, how do I network and build relationships that create sustenance for me? Emotional intelligence is responsible for 58% of your performance. You may be a great, well qualified person, you may understand your job perfectly well, but 58% of your performance is your emotional intelligence. 90% of top performers have high EQ. These are the facts and what they say. 90% of top performers have IQ. So you can't have bad uh, emotional intelligence and be a good performer. 65% of managers say they could do their jobs more effectively if they found ways to more easily manage distressed workers. So other people around you are distressed or they're not able to manage their emotions well. And if I, as a manager, could learn how to deal with that distressed emotion and that distressed worker, it would help me in that. 75% of Fortune 500 firms use emotional intelligence training. So that's how important it's going to be. I'm sure many of you are sitting on a question: how do I know what is my emotional quotient? What is my EQ? I know my IQ. I did well in my exams. I did my CAT exams. I did my SAT exams. I got my GRE scores. I got GMAT scores. I got my A levels, O levels, high school, college scores. All tell me what my IQ is. But what is my EQ? There are many tests online. You just search for EQ tests online. You can take those tests and get good indication of where your EQ are. So I would suggest immediately after this webinar is over, go online, take a few of those EQ tests and see what it tells you and what feedback it gives you about your emotional quotient. So one more time, I want to reinforce that EQ is very important. It's a gateway to a balanced life. IQ is the tip of the iceberg. EQ is what lies underneath. And it determines your physical health, your mental well-being, your relationships. It helps you manage conflicts and differences of opinion. It leads to your success and it builds your leadership. So now I want to move away from the theory part and get to very practical tips on what kind of situations you're going to encounter in the future, how things have changed, and how to give an emotionally intelligent response. Here is where we get into the practical part of things, and I think we are on time. I want to introduce a guest speaker, and I'm inviting on the seat next to me, Mr. Harsh Bhosle. Uh, Harsh is. Harsh, would you like to say hi to my?
Hi everyone. It's quite encouraging to see large number of professionals interacting today, and I look forward to sharing my experiences with you.
So just to introduce Harsh, he's the Chief People Officer of Nayara Energy Limited, which used to be formerly called SR Oil, has been renamed. And Harsh joined SR Steel in the SR Group in SR Steel in November 2010 as head of HR. And then he took charge as the Chief People Officer of Nayara Energy, formerly known as SR Oil, on August 2012. He has about 33 years of work experience. Prior to joining SR Group, he was working as Vice President HR at Saint-Gobain in India. And Harsh has also worked with RPG Group, Scottish and Newcastle, JSW Steel, Cadbury India, and Crompton Greaves. So you can see a very illustrious career here. And not just in terms of companies that he has worked for and positions he's held, but the contributions he's made in organizations that he has worked. I've known him for the last 20 years and maybe more, and I've seen him adding value everywhere. Within Nayara, he has been instrumental in developing the HR function of Nayara Energy into a vibrant and responsive business function. And his leadership provides the necessary thrust, particularly in the areas of talent management and various employee engagement initiatives. So he's an MA and an MMS in PM and IR from Mumbai University, has significant IR experience as well. So Harsh,
Yeah.
how would you like to introduce the subject and your initial thoughts on emotional intelligence in the coming era?
Yes. As you rightly said, it has to be emotion with intelligence. What it calls for to understand the various patterns of communication and how effective one can be. To my mind, even now, the last mile of communication has always been the face-to-face communication, personal interaction. Whenever you acquire the business and sign 20, 12, $100 billion deals, while you do due diligence and everything through net and understand the people and the company, but the final sign off is when you shake hands, look into the eyes of the people, and then close the deal. So even if when you hire somebody at the senior level, you may have all the due diligence done by third parties and through secondary sources, but the final interview decides whom you are going to select finally. So a lot of things happen when you have the face-to-face personal interaction. So my focus and would be while sharing my experiences, and I would be more comfortable in sharing how this face-to-face communication has to be empathetic and with emotional intelligence.
So the human touch is unavoidable.
Unavoidable.
No matter how much of cyberspace we get into,
Yes.
virtual spaces we get into, the
Yes.
human touch is
Yes.
unavoidable.
The last mile will always be, even now, and I foreseeably seen at least next 2 to 3 decades, the final mile will always be covered through face to face,
Okay.
and the deal will be signed face to face. So while having interactions with people, I would like people to also understand that there are certain theoretical construct and how to use them. One is transaction analysis. When you have three ego states, and when we interact with people, either you be in parent ego state or child ego state or adult ego state, but how do you see where the person is coming from when you're communicating with those people, and whether you have a fluidity to move from one ego state to another ego state while having the conversation. It's not necessarily the situation demands that for this 1 hour situation I will be constantly in parent ego state. No, or child ego state. No, as a student also, you at times go and talk to your professor, getting into a parent ego state. When if you have read something and advise your faculty, ma'am, this is also a thing. That means either you get into an adult ego state or a parent ego state. Same happens with your boss, same happens with your peer, then same happens with your team members. So you have the ability to fluidity to change. One sentence could be in parent ego state, the second could be straight away in child ego state. That, do you have that ability? That is emotional intelligence.
So according to you, the frames of transactional analysis, and I remember transactional analysis, it's been around for a long time,
Yes.
actually help in building an emotionally intelligent
Yes.
response
Yes.
In an organization.
Yes. So right now we are in the adult to adult education interaction, but perhaps you may come and prescribe something to me. I have to then at times, if I remain in parent ego state, we will clash. So at that time, I have to immediately move into a child ego state and listen to, yes, Dr. Madhok, I agree. And that's how the response should be, thinking as to at what point in time you will move into parent ego state. At that time, I should move quickly into child ego state to give you the comfort and then continue with the communication. Otherwise, the communication will break down if both of us get into parent to parent chat.
So this is a very interesting outlook on emotionally intelligent communication, and what I'm going to do now is
Can I cover a few more aspects where
oh
I
yeah,
would like
sure,
to focus?
sure.
The another important aspect of communication is, while we talk about emotional intelligence, the new concept is coming as cultural intelligence. So how do you assimilate the
Cultural
culturally? And
intelligence.
so Indians, because of the diversity that we have, north, south, central, east, west, we are diverse in our culture. So we know how to deal with people. But do we know that we have this strength? Perhaps not. So why not understand that yes, as Indians, we have a huge advantage of having, because when I interact with expats or when I have worked abroad, they are very single dimensional. It's very difficult for them to quickly adjust. Whereas Indians are successful globally because they have very strong cultural intelligence. They can assimilate the culture, they can retain their culture, but also work with the other cultures. So understand that we have that strength, and that will help to a large extent in communication.
So that's absolutely another our insight, So we first talked about transactional analysis and how that can help us understand how to give an emotionally intelligent response in the future. And now you're bringing a new dimension of cultural intelligence. And I think as Indians, we are very diverse. I mean, within India, we are so diverse. We have north, south, east, west, religious diversity, racial diversity, regional diversity, generational diversity. We communicate well in this country across all those. So it's given us an inherent ability to, even beyond Indian boundaries, to meet people and understand how they can be culturally different and then give a culturally intelligent response. So I think we are well placed as Indians to give emotionally intelligent response, even in the coming new age and the fourth industrial revolution, and in the face of all the changes that we are witnessing today. I think as Indians we have a little bit of a head start. So now, how do we apply all this? I've spoken about emotional intelligence, I've spoken about the new age, and you've spoken about transactional analysis, you've spoken about cultural intelligence. How do we apply all this to various situations that we will encounter in the future, and how things are changing, and what is the best way to respond in these situations? So, folks, if you want to make notes, this is the time. You'll get practical tips on what to do, how to do, what to say, what is a response to give in different kinds of situations. So the first thing I've taken is most painful point is boss relationships at work. Now imagine I'm a subordinate and I have a boss. Uh, the kind of bosses that we've had has also undergone a change. I remember in our time, bosses were very hands-on, and they would get into your life and your space and teach you what to do and how to do, and they would join you. But today, bosses are more hands-off, and sometimes you're in a virtual team. Your boss is not around to supervise you. Sometimes you're working from home. Sometimes you're working off-site, and boss is not around all the time to be hands-on, and you've got a set of instructions you've got to follow, and then there is an appraisal at the end of it also. So some of the tips that we've got here, which are emotionally intelligent responses given the new kind of boss relationships. Find out what your boss expects from you. That's the first thing. What is it that he expects from us? Understand that bosses are also working under a lot of pressure. I know everybody hates their boss. I know there's no perfect boss in any organization, but they're also working under some pressure, and they're also working in a certain context. Personal life is a bigger part of the workplace now, but not all bosses are on board. Your boss may be working 16 hours a day, And I've seen bosses working 16 hours a day. They go home and sleep for 7 hours and that's it. They come back to work. But not all bosses are like that. Bosses still tend to play favorites. They like some and they don't like some subordinates. So you have to be strategic how to play back. Bosses now know when it is time to part ways, and you should also know when it's time to part ways with a boss that doesn't work for you. And considering a new job, don't forget to think about the kind of boss you would like to have and look out for that. So, Harsh, now tell us something more about how you feel people should uh, give emotionally intelligent responses to bosses who are sometimes not available, bosses who are sometimes emotionally distant, not connected, and bosses who sometimes rough you up a little bit.
See, managing people, whether it is boss or the team members, is an art. There is nothing like prescription. So I can only share what has helped me in managing my relationship with boss, or where I have at times failed. So, every boss is different, and I must have worked with 15 boss. Every boss has idiosyncrasies. First, accept that. Even as a boss, as an individual, you also have the idiosyncrasies.
So nobody is perfect.
Nobody's
No boss
perfect.
is perfect.
Nobody's perfect. Boss also likes to be motivated. Boss is always lonely.
Subordinates need to motivate their bosses.
Exactly. So
not
many
the other way
times,
around.
yes, many times, but it should not happen that you do go overboard and you embarrass your boss. It's like people in the बोलते हैं ना मस्का लगाना. So you should not इतना भी मस्का मत लगाओ कि वो टाई पे गिर जाए.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you embarrass the boss. So the boss needs positive strokes as well. Boss needs to be told what is working for you when he says something, and what is not working for you when he says something. And you should be able to have a conversation with boss depending upon the timing. It's like hitting a six on a bouncer. So if you miss it, you're out, or you're bodily injured, or if you hit correctly, it's six.
Yeah.
Full marks. So timing is also important. So accept that boss is the necessary evil if he's evil, and he's lonely. He needs motivation. He needs support. He is not perfect. He needs recognition from his board. So don't try and jump. Say that many suggestion here, boss has taken the credit. He will give you the credit. And if boss is his integrity is in place, he is going to write your appraisals. First, ensure that boss is really powerful. Sometimes bosses are only for bosses, and there is somebody else who actually is influencing your career. But if boss is having a good integrity, boss has full control over your career, ensure that you learn the art of managing the boss.
So in the past, we used to say, when I was young and I was a junior person, I used to say, the boss is always right. Even if he's wrong, he's still right. And we have to find a way to work around it. But today, what you are advocating is more authentic response to the situation. Don't hide anything from your boss.
Yes.
Be willing to give him a lot of positive strokes, but at the same time, state your piece.
Yes.
And where you differ, where you have a different opinion, or where you find things difficult.
Yes.
So don't. So the authenticity of your expression with your boss is very important.
I always have, of course, among this audience, there will be some bosses, managing some teams. I really have concerns about the guys who are in their 40s, okay, because they have a team members who are in their 20s and 30s, and they have still bosses who are in their 50s. Now, these people have to manage two extremes, like they have to keep door open for their boss, but their subordinates won't give that to them. They will the subordinates expect that the bosses should say good morning to them and hold the door. So that's the challenge that those who are in their 40s to manage two extremes. One is hierarchical, one is challenging the hierarchy, and that's how they have to get the work done.
Yep. So yeah, I think the young generation is more prone to challenging the hierarchy.
Yes.
They have an innate tendency to resist authority and
Yes.
rebel against authority of any kind. And you need to recognize that within yourself as a subordinate. If the boss does get a little bossy, It's in the nature of things for that to happen, and one needs to learn to accept that. Okay, next come the peer groups. When we were young and in the 80s and 90s and till about 10, 15 years ago, the peer groups were not so important. I mean, we had mostly, we would relate to our boss and get instruction, and we had a team of subordinates, and we would, we would operate in that kind of almost like a silo. But today, your lateral relationships are very important, and many organizations are networked organizations. They have a matrix network structure. They don't have a hierarchical structure. Hierarchies are, if they are there, they are very flat hierarchies. So peer groups are becoming very important. And while it's important to have friendly behavior with your peers, uh, you know, they're also your competitors. There's also a group dynamic over there that comes up sometimes. So some of the tips we have over here for you is look in the mirror first as far as your peer relationships are concerned. Understand where you stand vis-a-vis your peers. You don't have to blurt out any judgment that you might have in your head all the time. So learn to reserve your judgment. We not always like what's happening. We always find fault that okay, here is so and so, and he's not perfect, and we find faults with him first rather than find what's good about him. But I think one of the qualities of emotional intelligence is how do I reserve judgment? How do I understand the person as he is without judging him? Allow your peers to save face, because you can't be insulting a person or you cannot speak derogatory about a person. Allow them, if they've made a mistake or they've goofed up, treat it with grace, so that helps them save face. Don't always strive to win. You don't have to be the most loudest person in the room. You don't have to be the most person with the most ideas in the room. You don't have to be the best dressed person in the room. You don't have to be the only person who has Josh in the room. You must allow others, your peers, some space also. Avoid full face-off situations. Don't get into a head-on confrontation and a head-on conflict with your peers. It won't work for you. In fact, I always say, at work, your peers are people whom you can be friendly with, but you can never be friends with them. You need to make the difference between being friendly and being friends. But the minute you start being friends with your peers, getting into deeper relationships and heartfelt conversations, you never know when that will come back to you. Because ultimately, it's about work, performance, competitive achievement, and comparative ratings and stuff like that. Finds ways to reciprocate. So if someone pays you a compliment, find a way to say it back to them. If someone has a gift for you, find a way to. So there's always a mutuality. Appreciate others. Avoid gossip. Gossip is definitely no, and manage your boundaries. Things that you will say, there must be a filter in your mind that filters out negativities and statements that might backfire on you. So tell us, Harsh, your experience with peer relationships and what advice do you have for
Yeah, well,
our
I
audience?
will endorse what you have said. That they are always the competitors, and as you rise in the hierarchy, see the optionality for people to grow limits. So it's going to be really dog eats dog competition after certain levels. So, what is important in peer relationship? To my mind, my experience is that it's the litmus test of your professional knowledge.
Exactly.
Okay, because this is where you cannot play politics. This is where you cannot, manage the relationship, because they are going to eat you if you are not professionally thorough in what you're doing. So they will challenge you, whatever you do. So you need to be thorough. If in HR, if you want to drive certain engagement initiatives, whether if you want to propose something, whether any talent management process, because then the moment you introduce a process, you're going to introduce certain limitations. Because if you say that this is our criteria for giving, because you can't rate everybody five being the highest, so you will limit. whether it is forced ranking or whatever it is, or whether you say that
The bell curve.
bell curve remains. If there is a different conversation, if you don't have the bell curve in your organization, you should give Nobel Prize.
Nobel Prize. Okay, that's an interesting
So
one.
that we can have a separate conversation, because there is always a
It should be
priority
the
in
subject
life.
of another webinar
Yeah,
altogether.
absolutely.
Bell or no bell?
Yeah. If you don't have Nobel in your organization, the organization should be given Nobel Prize.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is, in peers, you need to have very direct adult-to-adult conversation. You need to have solid database, homework, before giving any proposal in the meetings, or it is better to sound off some of them who are your supporters, because you have also given them support. It should be straight away trade-off. That mutuality has to be, and it's adult to adult mutuality, not that because please help me, blah, blah, blah. They will help you if you are able to help them. It's nothing that they don't. There is no mercy. So have thorough understanding, bounce it off with the challengers within your department, whatever you are going to propose to the. So have that black hat somebody wearing in your team. So, or bounce off with some of the well wishers of your team who speak your peers' language. In the organization who is like a peer, who is a critic, or who is a somebody who gives you positive feedback or something like that. So go with thorough preparation. It's a litmus test when you are dealing with litmus test of your professionalism. I'm not talking about relationship. It's a litmus test of your professionalism.
I think that's such a powerful statement, that peer relationships are the litmus test of your professionalism.
Yes.
Yeah? And with the peers is where you've got to really maintain more professional behavior than any other relationships at work. All other relationships have a lot of idiosyncrasies, but within peers there will always be a pecking order, and there will always be a questioning of the pecking order. There will be a lot of competitive pressures to move up and down in the pecking order. Make sure that you stay on top of things. Okay, subordinates or team members. Now I'm the boss, and how do I deal with my subordinates? Today we don't even call them subordinates, we call them team members. And some of the tips that we have here on the presentation are that employee trust must be earned. First, you have to offer your trust unconditionally, and then test and see how they respond, and then how it works out to be, how can you earn more and more trust with them. Tell them your name, not your title. So this is just a short way of saying that it's about who you are, not the position you occupy. So it means that you need to relate, meet them at their level. There's an equalization that needs to happen, not a top-down approach. I mean, you're definitely the boss. You have to remain in charge. But at the same time, talk about who you are rather than position that you occupy. Ask your team members or subordinates what is more important to them, because they're ultimately the ones who are going to do and achieve. Listen effectively. In fact, I have an acronym here called WAIT. First, wait, listen. Wait means, why am I talking? WAIT. So wait, listen. Wait, listen. Don't talk unless you have to. Don't occupy space unless you have to. Save surprises for birthdays. Don't jump a surprise on them and say, hey guys, we're going to be working late today and nobody's going to go home till this job is over. Nobody's going to like you for that. So only surprises are birthday surprises, where you might pop a cake or a gift or something like that. But make things as predictable as possible. Not something that you figure out along the way and something you just cooked up for the moment. Be respectful. I think that's given for everybody, especially your subordinates, because you're the boss. You need to refer to them, in a respectful way. In Hindi, you will say aap, and you'll say not tu and tum, that way. Show them that you're not afraid of failure. So if things don't work out, accept with grace that failure can happen. Lead with integrity. Now, integrity doesn't mean monetary integrity, bribery, corruption. Yeah, that's one part of integrity. But integrity in terms of relationship. If you have made a commitment, you will do something, then honor your commitment and prove that you have done it. You've done it. If you're making a promise, then deliver on that promise. Let them manage tasks. You're not the task manager. You're just a motivator and you're just supporting them. They're the ones who are managing tasks and doing tasks also. Build up and support and run in rough times. Whenever there's deadlines, pressures, things go wrong, problems crop up, how can you create a support for them and not make them feel as if they're like on their own and nobody supported me in what I had to do, and you are not the only one who has all the answers. Even if you do have the answers, don't keep providing them with answers. We always say teach your team members to fish, don't give them fish. So teach people how to fish. Don't give them the answers, help them find the answers. So tell me, Harsh, from your experience in the new era that we are going to be encountering, in Naya era in the future, uh, automation, technology, uh, virtual reality, cyberspace, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, all those things. How are relationships changing with subordinates and team members? And what is an emotionally intelligent response to it?
Ultimately, it is the emotional connect, as I say. Whether the technology comes in, are you exchanging notes through mails? Are you giving instructions through mails? Or are you inviting people to comment on your work or proposals? It's ultimately the human interaction, the last mile. I would say that there are two or three things that really will help to manage your team members. First and foremost, list down what your boss wants to do to you. Many times people say, "Boss, ने मेरा performance appraisal ही नहीं किया." Write down. Boss has not done my performance appraisal. Then people say that boss has taken my credit. Write down, boss has taken my credit. You are upset with your boss. Say that boss has never sent me for training program. Boss has never praised me in public. Fine. Now you have 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 list. Now do those to your people, and you'll manage team effectively. What you have not received from your boss, what you want genuinely pass on. At least you will do that part better. That you will become a better boss. That is one. Second,
So what you're saying is very interesting. That I, as a boss, should think of how I didn't get the perfect boss when I was a subordinate.
Otherwise, you don't
And I
have
should try to be the boss I would have rather had.
Yes. Yes.
And
to leave your boss.
Yeah.
You leave your ideal boss, and then at least get that pleasure. Boss, मेरा boss तो नहीं है, लेकिन मैं तो हूँ.
Oh, wonderful.
So
That's a very positive way
yeah.
to look at the situation. And what kind of subordinate team members?
Yeah. So
what else?
Second is the team always wants the top cover. One of my best managers, I don't want to name the name, I can, it's your husband, Raman. I always symbolizes him. One best thing that he always had was giving top cover. So once you know that your manager or your team member is honest, he has done his full work, he has done the best possible, may not have given the right result, or somewhere it has faltered, somewhere it has not. At that time, give him the solid cover. That shoulder that problem on your head. Stand up for your boss when the subordinate or your team member really needs your cover, not when everything is hunky dory.
So that's what it says, build up and support in rough times. So
Yes.
suppose something went wrong or problem encountered, but we did our best and we tried to manage it the best to our abilities. It was sincere, honest effort, and there were some things that we could have maybe in hindsight done better, but we did what we had to do. So as a boss, I need to provide a top cover and stand up for them and not find fault with them and say you are to blame and that
Yes.
you did it wrong and you could have done it this way, you could have done it that way.
So two things. One is list down which your boss has not given you, give them. Second, give top cover, and your team will just be very, very happy and ensure that the team knows that you are doing this.
So
Many
good.
times people may not know. It is communicating to your team member that how directly or indirectly how I am protecting you, how I am taking care of you. So in today's world, recency and recalling of whatever you do is important. So have that communication and educate people how you are taking care of them.
So good. So let's move to the next one, appraisal time.
Dr. Anita, just before we move to the next topic, we have two very relevant questions which have come up from the audience. So,
Sure, please tell us.
The first question is from Renu Jain, who wants to know what if your boss is biased? How do you deal with such situations?
Okay, Harsh, would you like to talk about this? If the boss is biased, and everybody thinks the boss is biased, and
Yes.
when biased in favor of someone else, nobody says the boss is biased in favor of me.
Yeah. So first and foremost, understand the reason for the bias. If it is out and out unethical bias, you can't do anything. But you need to be properly introspect as to why is particular person is liked by the boss. You really need to investigate whether how that person is helping that boss or ensuring that the right data is provided at the right time, is willing to work, go extra mile, even accept at times the idiosyncrasies of the boss. So please understand where the bias is coming from. If it is unethical, maybe I don't have to give any list of unethical relationship. It can be parochial, it can be only in relationships or whatever. You can't overcome those. Okay, unless you go through a whistleblower and ruin the everything. But if it is non-unethical, means it's a part and parcel of the work, then better imitate that person
Okay.
or find another boss.
So if the
or leave
bias
the
is
company.
unethical
Yes.
and he's favoring somebody because of maybe the way he or she looks, or some special relationship they may have, or
It's very difficult to.
or because this person is doing a lot of chamchagiri and is buttering up the boss, then he's biased in favor. That's unethical bias, and it's very difficult to deal with. And it's better to recognize it and
Live with it or
live with it.
or leave it.
Yeah, I always say you love it or leave it or live with it. Three
Yeah.
things. You can't change some things. But if the bias is because the other person is a better performer and is producing tasks and more effectively, more efficiently, or is a better learner, or is more professional in their behavior, then you need to understand the boss is favoring this person because of certain work criteria.
See the pattern of bosses' favorites. So is it only one person, or he has a set of people whom he is biased towards? If there is a set of people, that means it is not unethical unless they are making money together. But if there is a pattern which is emerging, if there are deliverables or behaviors, follow that rather than say that this is I cannot.
Okay, so Renu Jain, I hope your question is answered to some extent. If there. Jyoti, are there any other questions?
Yes, we have one more question from Ravinder Gupta, who wants to know what if there, since we were talking about peer relationships as well, so what if one of the peer member is playing a leg pulling game behind the back and trying to share negative feedback with the top management for a particular employee? How does that specific person deal with such situations?
How many, perhaps you, if not played, you should at least watch kabaddi.
Kabaddi.
Kabaddi. So, you should have a strength if somebody is pulling your leg to pull that person with you. If you don't have the strength, collect, that's as I told you, you can sensitize your peers to ensure that how that person is not only destructive for yourself, but the destructive for the team and also potential destructive for that person. So if you build that camaraderie with your other peers, you can easily manage one person. But if four are against you out of five, and you are only person, then you need to reflect. But if one person is against you, three, four are neutral, two are with you, you need to go and chat with those two people as to what is clicking and what is not clicking, where it is. Understand how this the negative person or who is pulling your leg is affecting the other four who are neutral. If you can build that, dushman ka dushman dost hota hai. So if you are able to understand that this guy is also, this person is also creating trouble for the other four, and if you can impress upon them, they will support you. And again, you will have to support them. As I told you, it has to be mutual. They should see worthy in supporting you, and they will see that worth only when they know that this person can support me in when I need them.
And in the long run, peers who pull your leg and speak negatively about you behind your back, they only burn themselves out in the long run.
Exactly. Stay professional.
Yeah, they are the ones, they kill themselves, in the long run. They dig their own graves, they paint themselves into a corner. So that also happens. So, but that doesn't mean you should just wait for them to,
But use that as an opportunity, because they will be able to pull your leg only when you give your leg to them.
yeah. So,
So that's why I'm saying kabaddi. So if you are able to ward off that part, because there is going, somebody is going to catch your leg. If you are not able to use your hands properly and put that person at the distance, you can still win.
okay, Jyoti, I want to move to the next slide, and so that we close in the next 10 minutes, 5, 7 minutes maybe. And
Sure.
then we take all the questions in one go. Yeah.
Sure.
So
Thank
appraisal time. I can do another full webinar, maybe more than one webinar on appraisal time and how to give an emotionally intelligent response at appraisal time. But just understand one thing. Now we talked about bell curve and no bell curve and Nobel Prize for companies that have no bell curve. But there are. It's a fact of life. There will be underperformers, average performers, and overperformers. It's a fact of life. No two people are equal performers. We all believe in our performance, that we did a good job, we did a sincere job, and we didn't get the rewards that we deserved. Somebody else got a better reward. We are unable to see that achievement as compared to our achievement. So I just have very, very, very brief tips here, because this is we can only touch the tip of the iceberg right now as far as appraisal time is concerned. But if underperformers, find a way to be more detached and view your performance more objectively if you have been classified as an underperformer. Put aside your feelings. You say, okay, I'm feeling undervalued, I'm feeling unrecognized, I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling I didn't get my just rewards. Keep your feelings aside and then try and look at the situation objectively. Why did you get an underperformer rating? If you got an average performer rating and you think you should have got more, and just look at keeping aside anything, any limiting beliefs about average performance. To me, if I'm an average performer, means I've added value. Bulk of organization is an average performer. The average performers are the spine and the backbone of the company. The average performers are the ones that keep the wheels of the organization going. And if I'm an average performer, just recognize you're a valuable contributor, that you have done your bit and you're being recognized for it. So, what if you didn't make it to the high performers list? Be patient about results. Try and learn more on the job. Try and look at where you could move from being an average to a top performer. If you're an overperformer or a top performer, you need to praise others, not flatter them. You need to praise overperformers. You speak about, okay, I like you because you did this and you did this and you did this. Don't say, I love you, you're fabulous, you're magical, you're fantastic, and you're great. Don't pump up egos of overperformers. Be realistic, give praise where it's due, etc. And letting go of the need to control and manage performance. So tell us, appraisal time, Harsh, what is your take on emotionally intelligent response to the bell curve?
Yes. Appraisals actually is the what you call make or break kind of a relationship with the line manager. So it's very important that how much time and quality time that you spend on the when you conduct this process. And if you, there are sometimes people follow only paper appraisals. They don't have it's a so data oriented appraisal system that you give the rating based on the achievement. Many times you can do self assessment, and then boss will just endorse.
In
And
fact, not even paper now, it's
yeah,
online. So
online.
it's
Paper means I'm saying that online.
just a form filling
Yeah, form
exercise.
filling exercise. So what is important in appraisal is to have a face-to-face conversation. It is also important to have a lot of empathy in that conversation. See, the high performers need to be managed differently, but they manage themselves to a large extent.
Mhm.
As you have said, solid Bs, those who are into B but um, higher trees, those are the ones who need to be properly communicated as to what is working well for them, because you're still not giving them the top rank, top rating. So you need to ensure that their areas of improvement are properly articulated with incidents rather than just motherhood statements. And for the bottom of the bell, which many companies follow forced exit, which is very, very unfortunate. But if at all you are doing this, and if you have to, there are sometimes people have to be rated below normal in the ranking system also. So what is important is communicating very, very directly with empathy as to why this is not working in this company, why this is not working here, because that if you blame it on the system, where the HR department has told to do this, the company has decided to rank, and then we have to rank, then that means you are externalizing the problem. The fact is that you have putting that person at the bottom of the pyramid within your department. It's your decision ultimately, but you force externalize that problem, own that decision, and make that person aware, so that that person, because pink slips are reality, and it's going to be more real in India as well as it was in the Western world. So when you give honest feedback about the strengths and also areas of improvement, there is a good chance that the person will work on the area of improvements, and then will his or her employability will go up, or at least that person will strengthen these strengths to such an extent that it will counterbalance the areas of improvement, and find a job where maximum he or she can use her strength. So the choice post that appraisal then becomes easier for the receiver, because now that person knows which is working, which is not working in this company, and which is generally my strength areas. So if I have to choose an option, where will I go? And if at all the new job also has similar requirements where my weak areas are there, then I should go prepared before getting into that job, so that in that, because sometimes once you're labeled as a two rater or one rater, it's very difficult to change to three and four rating. So at least you start afresh, and then you'll work on those weak areas, and then have a better career there. So employability, so honest, empathetic feedback is essential.
Data-based.
Database, incident based is important, and quality time.
Okay, so I'm going to move on because a lot more can be said, but let's move on because of time constraint, and it's only part of our topic today, not the whole topic. So about work-life balance, it's changing now, and it's only and you see today it's natural and it's normal, considered normal, that people will work till 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. every day, and then they come home by 10, and there's no time for the family, and there's no time for any kind of work-life balance. So life has changed as far as work-life balance is concerned, and it's changing for the worse. It's not going to get any better. Um, Learn to let go of perfection. You cannot be a perfect parent and be a perfect professional at the same time. So make some compromises along the way. Nobody's perfect. Learn to let go. Don't try and be a superwoman or a superman trying to be good at home and good at work at the same time. Learn about company policies that support you. Many companies have maternal leave, paternal leave. Many companies have flexible timings. They have work from home options. They have job sharing options. And I'm not talking just about women who need to do baby and child care, but also men who need to pitch into the housework as well. Establish boundaries at work. If you're working from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the evening, it's 8 hours, and 8 hours is a lot of time. You can get a lot of things accomplished in that 8 hours. So try to find ways to draw the boundaries as to what you want to accomplish within that 8 hours. and try and stick to that discipline. Use technology to your advantage. Today, you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel, and you don't have to reinvent a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things which make you more productive. Prioritize your time. There's another whole webinar there on time management that is possible. And be selfish about your me time. I think it's very important today. We never had this term in the past, me time, but today there is a term called me time because there's a need for it, and give it a priority. That there is some time which I need for myself. I'm not going to compromise on that. Seek a network of support. Here in India, we're very fortunate. We have older parents, grandparents, children, daycare, childcare, maid servants, drivers, nannies, and grocery suppliers on the phone, and so many other ways. There's a lot of ways that make life a lot easier to manage home and family at the same time. And just be assured, guilt is natural. No parent feels if a father is working late and or is traveling out, he feels guilty about not being available to his children, and the same is true of a mother as well. So if the same is true, even if you don't have children, you feel you're not given enough attention to your wife, and the wife feels she's not given enough attention to her husband because she's that busy at work. So work life, it's a balance, and a balance is like a tightrope. There's no perfect one way and one, half and half. You have to keep balancing every minute and every second and every nanosecond. You have to find ways to deal with work and life. So tell us emotionally intelligent response to work-life balance. And then we will, there are a couple more slides on money and finance and loneliness, but we will close here in the interests of time. And we will then look at question
So
and
for
answers
work
only.
life, I would say that my personal experience, Indian companies have really moved far for what it was in 80s and 90s when it was a regimented organization, hardly any fun at work. And sometimes in last 10, 15 years, we have started seeing fun at workplace. And that's where the work-life balance concept also came in because of the technology when you are wedded to the company 24/7. Sometimes I call that we are not only contract labor, but we at times become bonded labor. Okay, so even on holidays, you have to deal with a lot of meals
Work
and
issues, yeah.
work issues.
And then sometimes you have the clients in the
Yeah,
US, so you're on the job 24/7.
Exactly. So, but can we change that? Perhaps. But what is it in my hand? I would say, in my hand, while the pressure of the work will continue, pressure of the delivering and competition will continue. If the companies have to grow, you have to continuously work for this. Even when it is quarter on quarter performance, nobody can guarantee CEO's job. How can you see security for your own self? These companies cannot have their own security. How will they provide you security? So the best course is when you're talking about work-life balance, bring life to work. So find out that these days companies are very reciprocal in terms of if there are any suggestions coming or. So get the buddies, have your life at work. That is the best solution which is in your hands. Have 5, 6 very good friends.
But you've got family back home.
Yeah, but that also has to be dealt with. When you are at work, bring life at work, and that's what I'm trying to say. So that when you don't feel starving as to get some emotional support within the or why we look actually functionality. If you see, family's functionality is also to give you emotional support. To have your anchor somewhere. If you also have those anchors, emotional anchors at workplace, so then you will not be stretched or stressed. There will be still a challenge because we have to live with that challenge. It's like you
So
can't
life
do
will be
it.
not so mechanical at work.
Exactly. So don't send.
In fact, that's our entire series that we offer from my firm. Is called Live Life and Love Work.
Yeah.
And that's part of my logo here. Live life, love work. It's part of the theme. That
So bring life to work.
Bring life to work, and also bring work to life.
Work to life is going to come anyway.
Okay.
It has already happened.
That's a given.
Yeah.
So, Jyoti, I will like to hand over to you now at the end of this slide to ask any questions that may have come from the audience.
Yes, we have a lot of questions that have come from the audience. The first question is from Shrikant Sundaram, who wants to know: does emotional intelligence have a correlation with the employee experience? And also, does emotional quotient affect the teamwork?
Emotional quotient does affect teamwork because in a team there are different kinds of people. Somebody is more creative, somebody is more rebellious, somebody is more informed, somebody is more extroverted and networking. So the team comprises of different people with different emotional tendencies, and some people are introverted also, and they don't speak much or they don't speak out so much. Some people like to be in the center of things, some people like to be spectators and watch what's happening. So being emotionally intelligent in a team is very important because you need to understand yourself first, what is your inner nature, and then you need to understand the nature of the other team members, and then find ways in which you manage the situation. There is another part of the question which I'll address after Harsh has given his
You
perspective.
cannot remove emotions. Therefore, you need to have emotional intelligence. Even Terminator Arnold Schwarzenegger developed emotions despite being the machine. And people do say that AI in the future will have emotions. They will also have some likes and dislikes over the period of time. So emotions, without emotions, the organization is not going to work.
Exactly. And when you're talking, Shrikant, when you're talking about employee experience, what is the experience? It's 90% emotion.
Expectations.
90% of is how I feel about whatever I'm experiencing. So, for example, the air conditioning could be below normal, or it could be very warm inside in hot and stuffy environment. But how do I feel about it? Do I say, okay, never mind, let me get on with it, or do I say, hey, let's try something about it and solve the problem? So the emotions are 90% of the experience. Only 10% of the experience is in the external environment, and we need to recognize that. So if you are designing employee experiences, which is the trend of the day, then you need to be more emotionally intelligent and tune into working with emotions of people so that the experiences that you're designing have the desired effect. I may design an employee engagement experience, but people are very cynical and skeptical and very disbelieving and very rebellious. No matter what I do, you will still, not find a positive response from people if you do not tap into their emotions. So designing employee experiences is not the solution. Working with emotional intelligence so that the employee experiences that you design can be received in the way they're intended to is the way you need to focus. I hope that addresses your question.
Absolutely, it does. In fact, for an effective leadership, according to you, what are the top five aspects of emotional intelligence that would be required?
I think it all begins with self awareness. It all begins with knowing your emotions. There is I know those who get into neurosciences, that's another subject of another webinar altogether. But there is a part of your brain, which is the reptilian brain, which is the seat of all emotions: anger, frustration, joy, happiness, sorrow. There's a part of your brain which is reptilian, is hardwired into your response mechanism. And that's the seat of all your emotions. Then there's a part of your brain which is the cerebral cortex, which is the frontal lobe here, which speaks logic and rationale into those emotions. So, knowing yourself, knowing your emotions. So, for example, joy. What makes me happy? What triggers my happiness? Anger. What makes me angry? What are the triggers there? Sorrow. What makes me sad? Loneliness feeling. Identifying what makes me lonely. So, identifying your triggers and knowing your feelings, it begins with just knowing yourself. So, self awareness is the first. And then adding intelligence to that self awareness is what leads to emotional intelligence. Then there are other aspects about how do I create boundaries and filters for myself so that my emotions are expressed in ways that are constructive and positive. So, for example, Mahatma Gandhi was very angry with the British for ruling the country. Now, anger is not a very positive emotion, but he transformed that anger in such a beautiful way to protest against the British in a way which was non-violent and non-cooperative, and eventually he won the battle. And he transformed his anger into a positive direction. So, how do I manage the emotion? How do I transform negative emotions to engage with the world? Is also so. I don't know if it's a direct five-point answer, five bullet point answer, but I think I covered a little canvas about what your question was about.
Absolutely. Thank you. And beautiful example shared on managing and transforming emotions. The next question is from Prasad Sarna, who wants to know how to deal with team members who are stubborn and indisciplined, and also, how to share feedback effectively with such people who are not really accepting any feedback that's shared.
So, best is to have a lot of incident and data-based conversation. Have Now this is prescriptive. It may work, it may not work. It has worked with me in the past. First and foremost, your own you need to really introspect as to whether this behavior is genuinely destructive or is coming out of some sort of frustration or some sort of the expectations which are not met by the management or by you. So is it a reaction or a response? So once you say that this person is genuinely destructive, despite everything, then you have to deal with nothing to do with Sam or Dam. It's only Danda and Bhed. Means either you really reprimand the person by way of rating, by giving the feedback, and also deciding how the career progression will happen or not happen. And bhed means at the end of the day, you need to sack that person. And many times people hesitate to take the last action, but sometimes you have to demonstrate that yes, this kind of behaviors are not going to work. So either segregate that person, give that person some insignificant role, transfer that person out, or if required, sack that person.
I will partially agree with you. In the first case, I would first try and understand the reason and the root cause of the stubbornness. And there's usually an insecurity there which makes people not receptive to feedback.
Which I say.
There's an insecurity within. So try and understand that insecurity. And if possible, gain trust of the person. And from there, you begin the process of providing the feedback, engaging in a dialogue, getting the person to open up and speak about his real feelings and his real insecurities. And you try up to a point. And if the person is totally not receptive to feedback, totally stubborn, totally irresponsive, then I do believe in the fact that it's better to nip the problem in the bud, because something like this can escalate. And I have seen one incident very recently, witnessed it with my own eyes. One very person not receptive to feedback, she took down an entire team with her, and the entire team had to leave the organization because she was so destructive, because she just refused to accept feedback from anybody. In fact, this girl was also assigned a mentor in the organization. She refused to go for mentoring sessions also. So the organization suffered, the team suffered, the boss suffered, the girl suffered, she also lost her job. And it was a lose-lose proposition for everyone. So I always say nip the problem in the bud. If there is something which like this, don't let it simmer. Don't let it, become bigger than it ought to be. Nip it in the bud, get rid of it.
The caution is that you not got to develop sufficient in today's context. Everything can get into posh or anything can get into whistleblower. So how do you secure yourself when you're going to have a difficult conversation? If you're talking to another woman employee, ensure that some other senior woman employee is also sitting with you while giving that feedback and having that difficult conversation. So ensure that you are fully secured in today's context. Otherwise, you will have egg on your face.
I do believe that because of whistleblower policies and POSH and all these avenues that are available to you
Social
guys
media.
in social media, I do believe that the increasing tendency in organizations is to subvert issues like this and push them under the carpet and not deal with them, turn a blind eye, and then they fester and they blow up in your face eventually. So it's difficult conversation that must be had. I believe now the time has come for HR to create policies on how to deal with difficult people and what kind of behavior will not be tolerated in an organization. So it's time for us to take that bull by the horn as well. Okay, next question.
Great inputs. Thank you. The next question is from Shrinu Pitambram, who wants to know how to fill the communication gap between managers and subordinates having generation gap. And on the contrary, there's another question from Archana, who wants to know what if there is no age gap between the boss and subordinate and hence results in insecurities. So,
So no age gap is more difficult to deal. In India, we have a culture where age is respected. We tend to have bosses who are at least a few years older than us, if not very much older. And if you have a boss who's sometimes younger than us or sometimes the same age as us, it's more difficult for us to live with that. So
Can I answer that?
yeah, please.
Because I have journey. When I started working in 86,
Yeah.
my boss was my father's age. Then gradually, as I started moving, he became like some sort of an uncle who is just 7 8 years. Sometimes you have family which has the uncles can be just 7 8 years older to you. So then, after some years, it became my just elder brother who could be 2 3 years older to me. Then there was a period when he reached my age. Today, my boss is 6 months younger. So
Okay.
and if I continue working for another 2 3 years, 4 years, you never know. You may have your boss who is of your son's age. If you join some of the promoter-driven organizations, many of your bosses will be your son's age.
So
So
there
you
is
have
a
to deal with it.
generation
Yes.
gap, and
How you
there are
adapt to
how you
this.
adapt is
Yeah.
important. But what's an emotionally intelligent response to give is that you meet people where they are,
Mm.
in their lives,
Yes.
rather than
Yes.
speak from your
Yeah,
perspective
exactly.
that I am older, I am wiser, or I am
Yes.
younger, and you meet people where they are,
Yes.
whether he's your boss, whether he's your subordinate, whether he's
Position.
older or
You
whether
deal with
he's
the position of the person that is older.
deal with the person, be
Ah.
person-minded, not so position-minded.
Now, what I'm trying to say, if it's a CEO, it's a CEO. Whether that CEO is my age, younger to me, or older to me, I'm not going to deal with that personality angle or the age factor. I'm going to deal that this CEO is in charge of the company's delivery, and I'm part of the HR team who is going to support him. So whether that CEO is 75 years old or 35 years old, his task is cut out, and I am the HR head. I cannot say that just because I have seen more weather and more winters and I have more gray hair, that has given more responsibility to run the company.
Yeah, so that's a filter we need to deal with, the age and generation filter in our minds, that our assumption is that bosses must be older, and if the boss is significantly older, it doesn't work for me. So we've got to deal with those filters. There are limitations that we put on ourselves in our minds. So according to Harsh, we need to look at, okay, the role interface. If the role is that of a CEO and he doesn't matter if he's older or younger than me or same age as me, doesn't matter about the generation gap. I have to look at the role interface and how do I interact with the CEO rather than
Actually,
his
the
age.
problem more than the age, I would also say the challenge will come when some of your peers become your bosses. Or in the hierarchically terms, if I'm in HR, there is some guy who is in refinery and who may be 2 levels below in terms of organization structure. And over the period of time, that person becomes the CEO. How am I going to deal with that situation? So that is more important.
Good, good. Okay, next question, Jyoti. And how much time do we have, Jyoti?
We are already through with the time, but I think we can still take up two three more questions. So since we have very good questions that have come up from our audience.
Okay,
Um,
so Harsh is telling me he has to leave in the next 5-10 minutes. So one question to Harsh, and then we can carry on with one more question after that.
Sure. The next question is from Mayur Lokhande, who wants to know how to say no to your bosses or peers without spoiling relationships.
There is nothing in life. There is a, I would say this is the unreasonable expectation that you will spoil something without saying no. The moment you say no to something, something is going to get spoiled. How do you ring fence that that spoilage is not going to vitiate the entire relationship?
Okay.
So that is the art. You say that without any damage, I will say no. It's not going to happen. So very very person to person specific, context to context specific. When to say that, how to say that,
I
in
don't think
presence
any
of
formula
whom? Yeah,
can
there is no
be.
formula.
There's
In
no
whose
formula.
presence? What is the timing? As I say, it's like hitting a six on the bouncer. So there is no perfect formula, but timing is important. Sensitivity is important, and how do you communicate, how do you also it sometimes you wait that sometimes situation says no to that, uh, situation gives the answer rather than you have to give an answer. At all you have to give to soft pedal it, do something good for that person, go with some good news that you have worked on this, and then say that this is also I have to do.
Yeah.
So this
So
balances out.
so so give the positive part
Yeah.
first, and then say the no. And the other thing is use softeners to
Yes.
the extent possible. Make a good
But
tone
don't
of
expect that
voice.
it will be a zero.
Choose your words wisely. Use a softer tone, and use a slightly positive approach to saying no. Don't be angry and say no. Don't be stubborn and say no. So say it in a manner which will be listened to and heard and understood.
And
Because when
don't.
you say no, uh, the other person may feel that this person is not supporting me,
Yeah.
or this person is not trusting me, or this person is not going to be on my side. So he doesn't understand why you know when it comes. It's what it. So try and anticipate the boss's reactions to when you say no, and try and debrief those reactions. So the boss is going to get
When
angry. Try and debrief on that before you say no.
And best is when you're dealing with boss and to say no, then you should have the art of communicating. If you say yes, how boss himself will be in trouble.
Yeah.
If you agree with the boss and you do something, eventually boss will be in trouble. If he knows, he comes to know that yes, ultimately this is a boomerang, it will hit him. He will say, he will agree with you. So,
Okay. So Harsh, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much
Thank you,
for
Jyoti,
being our
for
guest
coordinating.
speaker.
Yeah.
And we say bye to him, then we take
Yeah.
one more
Thank you,
question.
Harsh. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
Yeah, look forward. Thank you.
So we
Bye.
take one more question. Thank you.
Sure. We have two more questions. We'll quickly take them up.
Yes.
The next question is from Archana, who wants to know how to deal with bosses who do not meet their commitments often,
How to deal with bosses who do not
who
meet
do
their
not make their
commitments.
commitments often, or perhaps bosses who make false commitments and then again take go back on their words.
See, one thing that I learned early on in my career was that uh, gods have clay feet. Even gods have clay feet, which means that even bosses have their idiosyncrasies. Even bosses, no boss is perfect. No human being. I'm not perfect. Why do I have to expect a boss to be perfect? So think of the time that you made a commitment which you were unable to keep. Maybe it was a time commitment. I was promising to be somewhere at some time, I couldn't make it, or I was promising to deliver something deliverable and I couldn't make it. So, so first of all, try and understand why the boss is not able to meet his commitment. Is it a genuine, roadblock came up along the way? Is it genuinely, some reason for that? And is it a, if there is a genuine reason, well and good, learn to accept this boss has this problem, and for me to support it. But if bosses are making false commitment and promising you a rose garden when there is none at the end of the day, and giving you false promises, then by all means point it out and say, look, I feel let down. I feel let down because I thought I was going to get this, but I didn't get this, and I thought you were going to do that, but you didn't do that. So share your feelings in a way that doesn't backfire on you. You share your feelings with appropriate tone of voice, in the right context, in the right place. You don't have to share it in the lobby of your building and say, "Hey, boss, you let me down." No, I don't have to share it at a social event and say, "Hey, boss, you let me down." No, in the right place, an appraisal time or in a quiet conversation, one to one, not in public. Talk about the boss that, I feel let down because I felt you were committing to this and you said you would do this, but you didn't do it. So there's a appropriate time, place, and manner in which you would express your feeling of let
Right. Also, Banani
down.
wants to know how is it that you handle people, so there's a lot of credit hogging and taking away visibility, which happens at workplaces. So how you deal with people when you have worked on everything and in the end they take away the credit.
You have to stake your claim on the credit. If you're done something, you're clear this is your contribution and you didn't get recognized for it, you have to stake a claim. You cannot be a victim in this situation. You have to stake a claim and say, hey, this is my job, this is my credit. And you have to make that statement. Don't let it go, because once you start letting someone else take the credit for your work and your contribution, then it becomes a pattern for the rest of your life. So unless there's a mutuality. Today you take credit for my work, tomorrow I take credit for yours, and that sometimes happens. But if you are constantly deprived of the credit for your work, then I think something is it will damage your self-esteem in the long run. So find a way to stake a claim that this is your, or you have to jump into the rat race and win that game. There's a part of that part of the game you have to play.
Right, absolutely. In fact, in while sharing the PPT, you had shared that emotional intelligence is 58% of one's performance. Manisha Rawat wants to know what is the best way to integrate emotional intelligence with PMS.
With PMS,
Yes,
with performance
performance.
management system,
That's right.
to integrate emotional intelligence. Well, today performance management systems are increasingly looking only at goal achievement and bottom line, and objective to the extent possible. So objective goal achievement, and smart goals and specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound goals, and to what extent I achieve. So today, performance management systems are becoming increasingly only goal-oriented, objectives-oriented, and it's very difficult for uh, performance management system to give credit for and to measure and assess emotional intelligence, and that's not the trend. So if you're going into the future, in the new age, performance management will become more and more objective, more and more goal oriented, and there'll be no room for person with higher EQ to get better ratings. At the same time, it is also, you'll find some part of appraisal systems also measure things like teamwork and sociability, and 360-degree appraisals are done so that we understand how subordinates are being receiving, how the boss is assessing, how the peers are assessing. Sometimes even external vendors are asked to give rating, performance ratings. So the 360-degree appraisals, which are now becoming more of coaching conversations that you're having in organizations, that's where there is room for assessing emotional intelligence. So the emotional intelligence shows up in your 360-degree feedback. It shows up in your coaching conversations with your development IDP, individual development plans. Emotional intelligence doesn't often always show up only in performance appraisal.
True, very true. I'll just take up one last question for the day. So we do see that a lot of bosses keep changing opinions with regards to employees' performance. So one day it could be, the performance is exceptional, and the second day it could be that it's a mediocre performance. Now, how is it that as an employee we deal with such situations? Because a lot of time the focus is on visible actions and outcomes, and the invisible skills and competencies often get ignored. So what would be your inputs on that?
So, as I said today, more and more organizations are becoming increasingly bottom line oriented, and it's ultimately, at the end of the day, what you've contributed and what you've achieved that matters, not how hard you worked and how sincerely you worked, and so did you achieve at the end of the day or not? That's important. So, if the goals are written in ways that are very specific and measurable, in one, and every goal is different, every area of performance is different, there are no two goals which are alike, and in one year you may have super achieved a goal because of certain things you did right and certain ways in which you behaved and certain tasks you took on and certain relationships and networks you got support from. So in one year you may have achieved a goal or overachieved a goal and got therefore an exceptional rating, and then the next year you got a goal which perhaps was also equally objective, equally specifically written, but there are some things that didn't come into play. Didn't you didn't build your networks to support you. You didn't do this. You didn't do that, and therefore you underachieved or you just managed to scrape to that goal. It's not necessary for every goal to be overachieved and for you to be an exceptional performer each time. So you need to learn to understand, uh, if the goals are well written and smartly written, you can sometimes overachieve and get an exceptional rating, and then sometimes you can just manage to scrape to the goal and get a mediocre rating, and sometimes you miss the goal and you can get an underachiever rating. So it's natural for that to happen, and one needs to make sure that the rating that you got is as objective as possible and as data based as possible.
Right, very true. Great, Dr. Anita. With this, we come to an end of this webinar. It's big thanks to you as well as to Harsh. It was a pleasure. We were fortunate to have both of you with us today as speakers. We were really able to learn immensely from the content shared in the PPT and the insights that were shared by you. We have also got a lot of great words from our audience in terms of their feedback with regards to the practical examples and insights that have been shared with us today. So, a big thanks to you. We appreciate your time and efforts. And a big thanks to our audience as well, who've been supporting us in all the initiatives, who've been a part of our webinar today. So, your feedback really helps. Please continue sharing the feedback, and it'll help us move to the next level. Uh, Thanks to Veer, Bhanu, Kashish, Kirti, and Anu as well, and many more behind the scene for their never ending support. So, a big thanks once again, Dr. Anita. Thanks for all your time.
I'd like to also express thanks to you and to core HRIR team and Mr. Veer Bharat, who has tirelessly pursued this whole effort of bringing this webinar to the audiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope everyone has a great day ahead.
Thank you. And please, the recording of this webinar will be available on YouTube. So please share the link with as many people as you can to spread the good word.
Sure. We'll be sharing the link in all the groups and on LinkedIn as well. Also, in case you have any further queries, please feel free to reach out to us or to Dr. Anita, and we'll be happy to take on further queries if any.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.